say it. Somebody should. Let's talk about two time. Let's talk about bum wine, yeah. You're asking the questions that nobody could. Like where the bone thugs and are they in harmony? Help for Snowman.
All right, everybody. Nice to start off, and then I had like a little thing in my throat. Right at the beginning, right up top. Why do I even do this? Why even do a show? This is so dumb. Today, I'm somebody who reads. I used to read a lot of novels. Now I read some, and I read a lot of comics, if you will. And I wanted to cover what I've read so far this year, just because I feel like, that usually sends me down some paths, and because why not? And, after talking about reading Nintendo game manuals, I'm like, hey, I read stuff that's more heady than that, and I'm about to tell you about a lot of comics. So, I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm looking through these and like very few quote unquote real books. I didn't used to, so I keep track of all my books on Goodreads, which everything I use online is like bad. You know what I mean? Because I think the problem is everything online is bad. Someone was just talking about how Substack, is in trouble again because I think they like front paged some Nazi bullshit or something. Which, and now everybody's moved to a platform called Ghost, I guess, which is, I can get behind because I like Halloween and love the band Ghost. So on that level, I'm like, I could see it. But you got to understand, guys, for someone like me who has a almost non-existent following, it's impossible to like change platforms. You know what I mean? It's impossible for me to be like, well, I should put videos somewhere other than YouTube. And it's like, okay, yeah. Where I could put them other than YouTube is just straight in the recycle bin on the desktop because the equal number of people will see them. No one's going to see them on Vimeo. You know what I mean? Ever. It just sucks because I'm just like, A, how come these different platforms have to do all this stuff? And B, how come all these people are using this platform for this stuff? Like, are we seriously not over this stuff yet? We're seriously not over like the Nazi stuff yet? You know what I mean? Like, there are still people who are like, I think we could make Nazi stuff work. Why? Who? What's in it for you? Just do something, anything else is probably better than that. I think you'll get much further doing almost any other thing. Andrew Huberman has gone so much further than anyone ever should just by being like, what if I made up a bunch of tasks for you to do first thing in the morning and that made you a man? You know what I mean? It has no racial component that I'm aware of. It probably does because everything, you know what I mean? But it doesn't have any like outward racial component that I'm aware of. And like, he's doing good. I don't know. I don't think that's where it's at, guys. I don't think that stuff's where it's at. And like Goodreads, has similar problems, right? It was purchased by Amazon in like 2014, I think, 2016, something like that, which a bunch of people abandoned it for like Library Thing, which is Library Thing is, what Goodreads would be if they were like, we've only ever hired computer programmers and never once a graphic designer. And you're like, it's hyper functional. It's people who are like, I wish the entire internet looked like Reddit. That would be ideal for me. And you're like, yeah, I don't know, man. There's another one called Storygraph, which I know nothing about. And, people have just moved to other things because Amazon bad. And also, once Amazon bought Goodreads, it started to become clear that they weren't really doing anything. It seemed like they just bought it so that they could let it die on the vine. But they did just change the logo, like in the last, week or something. The logo is slightly different now. The G is a little bit different, but actually the layout of Goodreads looks exactly the same. I'm going to try and describe something to you all so that you know what I hate the most about Goodreads. And, then whatever. The thing I hate the most about Goodreads is that when you click on a page or click to a book or whatever, what happens is an ad pops down from the top. Oftentimes it's an ad for a book or something, but like right now it's a Capital One ad, which is crazy. But let's say I go to I'm going to click on a book here. Partially Devoured, How Night of the Living Dead Saved My Life and Changed the World. I would read that. And then it pops down, and Zom Rom-Com is the book that pops up. Now, this is an Ilona Andrews recommendation, the most fun I had during a zombie outbreak or something. And let's just look at what Penguin Random House says about this. It's like it's a paranormal romance. A lady teams up with her hunky neighbor, it looks like. And that's fine. I'm not shitting on Zom Rom-Com by Olivia Dade. You know what I mean? It might be good. It probably is. It's not for me though. You know what I mean? It's just not my thing. I don't really read romances. I don't find them cute. So like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Who is tricked by these? I don't understand who is like tricked into reading this stuff. But anyway, I suspect this is a big scam on the part of Goodreads because what they can do, okay, you charge for an ad by the click, right? So you're like, well, it gets this many clicks, and that's how long the ad runs. And I bet they're getting half to a third of their clicks on, or a third to half, depending on if you want to say it correctly, of their clicks are coming from accidental clicks like mine. That's my personal pet theory, that's what's happening. So they can cycle through ads, because really no one's ever going to click on a Capital One ad. Like, who sees that and is like, yeah, maybe I will use Capital One. But they will go to a page on Goodreads and be trying to click at something at the top, and then the ad loads last and pushes everything down so that when you were trying to click on a book title, now there's a Capital One ad there. Anyway, a lot of people have abandoned Goodreads. I have not, simply out of laziness or boredom or, whatever. Here's the thing, guys, like, I'm not somebody who's like, I'm sticking up for Goodreads or I think it's great or that Substack, I'm not like, it's amazing. I love it. The problem I have is I can't take subscribers over to a new platform. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel good about doing that, and I'm not going to do it. And I'm not famous enough to start my own thing. Like, I wish I was. If I was moderately well known, if I was making a living as an author, I would be like, I'm just going to do an email list and literally send it from my own email address. You know what I mean? And just do it that way. Because then I'm like, there's no restriction. I can do whatever I want. This is a great idea. But I'm not that. So when you're coming from where I come from, it's sort of like, look, I just want to like keep track of what I'm reading, write some book reviews that usually meander to nowhere, and move on with my life. I don't want to spend a couple hours transferring over to a new platform. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to learn a platform. I just want to do the activity. I always have this argument at work. Okay, we have summer reading every year, and sometimes like the staff that makes it, they're very well intentioned, and they make it so complicated. And I'm like, guys, you realize like summer reading is not everyone's whole life, right? Like, okay, one year we had, it was like a bingo card, but then within the bingo card, there were different sections. And in order to get certain prizes, you had to have certain things from each section completed. Do you know what I'm saying? And like the things were different biomes because it was like a nature related thing. And it was like, it was so much more complicated than it has to be. And I'm like, guys, can't you just make a bingo card and then be like, if you do 5 activities, here's what you get. If you do, if you get a bingo, here's what you get, something like that. Just make it easy. I mean, it doesn't need to be this complicated. Little nerds, little nerd kids are going to do the whole thing. It doesn't matter what the setup is. And, the very tiny percentage of assholes who are just like, let's go in and get your prizes that you're owed. I don't care if you do the reading. I'm sure those people exist, but they're so tiny that I'm like, let's not create things that make it more difficult for them. You know what I mean? Let's not create anything with them in mind, because fuck them. Anyway, it's like, I'm like, people just want to do summer reading and have fun. They don't want to learn a system. You know what I mean? They don't want to do this and that. Or like, sometimes I look at like a software for like making games or something. Or like, oh, here's how you could set up a like streaming music station in your house. And I'm like, oh, that's kind of a good idea. And then I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to learn Python to do that. Because I don't want to learn Python. I want to have a streaming music station in my house. You see what I'm saying? I'm very like, I'm focused on the end game. The Avengers Endgame. And streaming that in my home. All right, let's talk about, speaking of Avengers Endgame, the first thing I read this year was Mr. Lovenstein or Lovenstein Presents Feelings by J.L. Westover. These were like little comics. There's like a lot of little comics right now of aliens who are like learning about things on Earth, or there's like the 2 little bald guys, edgelord guys, all kinds of, or like there's like the Heart and the Brain comics, stuff like that. I think this kind of falls into that category of sort of thing, which is like comics for adults, which just made me think like, I want a newspaper. When I'm an old man, I want a newspaper, and I want it to have comics in it. I want it to have obituaries, because when people are dying, the obituaries are very interesting. Everyone makes fun of old people because it's like they read the obituaries. And I'm like, yeah, well, because if they're people then it's interesting. You know what I mean? You're like, isn't that so-and-so's sister? And you're like, holy shit, I knew that person. When you're a kid, you're like, yeah, I mean, you never see anyone you fucking know. But then your grandparents are like, isn't that the one who had that dog one time? And you're like, okay. And if there's like no good obituaries, just reprint one. Just be like, 10 years ago today is when so-and-so died. And I'll be like, my God, I'm old. Or like, so-and-so died. They were 29. And I'm like, it's so cosmically unfair, even to me, that I've outlived that person by this long. Like, what I've contributed versus what they've contributed, no comparison. Real ridiculous. I wanted to have a crossword, or maybe a connect the dot, or maybe both. And then just, I don't know, reprint some shit from The Onion or something. I just feel like a newspaper is like what you need as an old person, but I don't think they're going to survive till when I'm old. Unless maybe there's like a nostalgia for them, but even then, I don't know. I don't know, man. The next book I read was Hulk Grand Design Treasury Edition by Jim Rugg. Rugg. I hope he makes lots of jokes at his house about rugs. These grand designs are a thing that Marvel did that I think is really great, but probably isn't serving its purpose. Because what they do is like, okay, Hulk grand design. Everybody thinks, for example, that they want to read Fantastic Four. They're like, I saw the movie, I loved it, now I want to read it. And I'm like, you don't. Because here's the thing, I do, because I'm enough of a comics nerd that I can read comics from the 60s, and even though it seems like they got paid by the word, and even though there's not much going on, there's something about it that for me is like, oh yeah, this reminds me of comics. But most people aren't going to want to do that unless you're a huge nerd who's read a bunch of other comics. If you really like the movies, you don't want to start with Fantastic Four #1. Okay, you really don't. But what these Grand Design books do is they condense maybe the first like 20 or 30 years of a book and kind of bring you up towards ish the modern day, so that you don't have to read these super old comics. It'll do like, I don't know, a couple issues per page, and it kind of tells it in a comic strip format. And it hits all the high points. So once you finish, you kind of have read most of the big stories about that character. So you could kind of read that and then in theory sort of start reading the comics today. I think that's a great idea. But I think the problem with it is like the people who like it the most are like the me who would read the old comics anyway, but appreciate this take on it. So I don't know if this is working like it should, but I feel like that's not the fault of the makers of it. It's the fault of people are dumb and they don't know what they want. Nobody knows what they want. The best story from Hulk Grand Design, from Hulk's past, was I guess one time he fought Dr. Jekyll / Mr. Hyde, which is hilarious. I mean, it totally makes sense, right? It totally is like, well, I can see where the Hulk, has some roots in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, so that makes sense. But then you're like, I mean, the Hulk really seems like he could easily smear Mr. Hyde just into a red stain in the pavement. You know what I mean? They don't seem comparable. The Hulk can get like shot by a tank and he's fine. I don't think Mr. Hyde could take like a tank fire. You know what I mean? I don't think so. I don't think that's part of Mr. Hyde's like thing. I could be wrong, but I don't think I am. So, but I like the idea of it. But what I would really have liked to see is Dr. Jekyll fight Bruce Banner. I think that's the real fight that no one wants to see except for me. I want to see that fight. But I am fascinated by some of these revisits of these old things, because it's like you can just tell the early days of comics, they were just trying stuff. You know what I mean? And it's like all the things are like this, Star Wars and comics and all this stuff. You can tell looking back at it as an adult, you're like, I don't think they knew exactly what they were doing from the very beginning. You know what I mean? Like a lot of people will say, like, I don't think George Lucas knew that Luke and Leia were siblings in that first movie. I think he came up with that later because he wanted Leia and Han to be together, but without making Luke a loser. And you're like, well, if they're related, that solves that problem. Anyway, it's fun. I recommend it. I recommend the Grand Design books. I think the X-Men ones are the best. The Hulk one's good. The Fantastic Four one's good too. They're all good. And I think they're a much better way to like kind of dip a toe in the comics and see if maybe you want to take it further. Next, I read Sergio Aragonis, the Mad Magazine illustrator guy who also did Gru comics. Which I like. I like his comics. He does these like visual jokes that you kind of have to puzzle out a little bit. And I like that because they're like smart and stupid. You know what I mean? They're like stupid enough that you can enjoy them, but they're smart enough that you don't just like blast through it in 10 seconds. Maybe other people do. I don't know. Next, I read a comic called Skinner by Mickey Nielsen. I don't even remember what it's about. After a plane crashes, the influencers and their guide are stalked by a mountain man of local legend, Skinner. I keep hoping there's like been a few horror movies now that are like based around sort of influencers or influencer culture or whatever. And like, I'm hoping that becomes, very anachronistic, right? Like people are like, I don't know. Um, I don't know. It's just not very compelling to me. You know what I mean? It's like we did it for the gram, and I'm like, yeah, okay. I guess that's okay, but I miss the days of like, how come kids can't just be killed in an old abandoned house and be in the moment? You know what I mean? Look at them. No screens, no notifications, just dying in the moment. Next, I read Desolation Jones, the Biohazard Edition by Warren Ellis. Um, when I say this out loud, it's about a guy who was basically experimented on by the government a lot, I guess, and it makes it hard for him. He can't be like out in the sun really. Some other stuff, he's just there's he's been weirdly tweaked in a way that's not really explained, but is explained enough. Which is crazy because it's like he lives in LA. There's something that like weirdly I think people in entertainment industry have this obsession with LA. They're like, ooh, it's got a seedy underbelly and stuff. And I'm like, does it though? I didn't really see it when I was there, which, I wasn't trying to, I guess. I wasn't like, I'm going to hit the Bukowski Trail and go to this bar and beat my wife. You know what I mean? Have the real LA experience. But I don't know. LA to me just seems like it's like a fake city or something that was just invented. I've like started a book before and put it down because I was just like, I just don't feel like reading about LA. I just don't find it interesting. Anyway, this guy is hired by somebody to retrieve. There was pornography of featuring Adolf Hitler that somehow somebody had, and then somebody else took it from them, and they're trying to figure out how to get it back, I guess. Which is very crazy, but I have to give it some credit for like the it went there factor because I'm like, well, yeah, I guess a porno tape with Adolf Hitler on it. I'm like, this is a very edgelordy idea for a comic book, and at the same time, I'm like, there would definitely be that would be the top line story, right? If that was uncovered, that existed, that would be a pretty big deal. Um, so, I kind of get it. Let's see. Okay, I read a few volumes. I'll just do these all at once of Zom 100, Bucket List of the Dead, I believe it's called, or in Japanese, Zombie ni Naru Made ni Shitai 100 no. This is a book about, it's a comic, it's a manga, and it's about a guy who basically, there's a zombie outbreak in like Tokyo and all of Japan. And this is actually great for him. This makes him happy because he's like been going to work and he's just, working in an office and it sucks balls. And then he wakes up one day and there's a zombie outbreak and he's like, well, I mean, my plans were basically just go to work today and I never have to do that again. So actually, not so bad. Then, so he decides, he's kind of, like, seems like a good chance that I'll get turned into a zombie. So what I should probably do is, make a bucket list, right? And he's like, and I'll just try and accomplish as much as I can before I'm turned into a zombie, which are like, it's simultaneously very optimistic and very defeatist. It's something I'll talk a little bit about with another book in a moment, but a lot of manga, I think, has these characters or storylines that are very appealing because they're light and fast, and the characters are happy. You know what I mean? The characters are enjoying themselves. Anyway, it is like it's both. It's funny and a downer this one's not such a downer, but like other things like this will bring me down because there are a lot of movies and stuff, right? Like we watched the movie The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Is that what it's called? The Secret Life of Walter Mitty. Whatever, Walter Mitty, and he's always having these fantasies about doing things, and then he goes on a big adventure, right? And I think what we're meant to learn from that is like the life of Walter Mitty. What the fuck was that called? Who cares? And the message is kind of like, hey man, don't just like live your boring locked down life. You know, don't you go to work every day and no one cares. Like get out there and really live. You know what I mean? And I fucking hate watching movies like that because we watch movies, me and Poon Master Flex, on Sunday nights, right? And it's like we came up with this idea, and I recommend it to everyone, which is like Sunday night is movie night. And one of us picks a movie, and the other one picks out food to get like a takeout. And that's how we spend Sunday night. And it like gives you something to look forward to on Sunday. It gives Sunday a little structure. And it like helps get rid of the Sunday blues, or as some people call them, the Sunday scaries, which I can't decide if that's better or worse. But it does help a little bit. But when we watch movies like that, I'm always like, God damn it. Like this is confirming the fact that I shouldn't be happy about going into work tomorrow. So I'm not happy about that. But Zom 100 doesn't really feel that way. It's kind of like this idiot character is just so blindly optimistic about not having to go to work. He's so optimistic and happy about like he can kind of, his days are free and he's free to pursue his dreams now, that he's like, this is actually better for me. And you know, they kind of just skip over like all the death and destruction and stuff, and it's like, I don't know, it's fine. It's a weird tone and I like it. The next thing on my list is The Heistest Heist Ever Heisted, a heist story of a heist special editor's edition, which you've heard me read out loud to Poon Master Flex if you've been on here. If you want to do me a favor, if your library has Hoopla, I believe this is the only book that I've written that's available on Hoopla, and it's as an audio. And you can check it out from the library, and I think I get like 4 cents or something. But, you know, maybe it also helps my stuff be more popular, so do that. Plug for a book that I cleverly hid in here without trying at all. Next is a book called Draw It With Your Eyes Closed, The Art of the Art Assignment. This is a cool book. It's, I think the assignment for the book was a bunch of people who were like, who went to art school, and they were talking about their weirdest or most interesting assignments, and it's a bunch of instructors from art school. So, you know, like some of it is artsy fartsy. A lot of it's artsy fartsy, right? And like those are the worst essays in the book because it's like people saying, you know, like whatever. I don't know. They're talking about art theory and stuff like that, and that's boring. But there are like great stories in here about somebody in an architecture class was like, our professor got really frustrated because we kept designing these structures that had no stability. So he forced us to bake cake and then make bricks out of the baked cake and use that to build structures to teach us that like, you know, how that kind of stuff works. And, you know, he's like, it was a nightmare because we're baking these, we have all this icing and these baked cakes and stuff. And like all of us had by, you know, 1 week into this project had eaten more cake in that week than we'd eaten in our entire lives. No one wanted it. Rats and roaches are filling the art studio. It was horrific and terrible. And like, we learned a lesson. I don't know if it was the lesson we were meant to learn. But anyway, it's a fun book. You know what I mean? If you don't, it's fun because like you can tell what kind of artists you like. And I know which artists I like, which is artists that don't take themselves too seriously. It's that thing of take what you do seriously, but don't take yourself seriously. There's some really interesting assignments, or someone else talked about, he made an assignment to make like a chair out of cardboard. And, you know, it was like, it just has to be a chair that you can sit in. And then it was like, well, it has to be collapsible, so it folds flat. And then it was like, it has to be collapsible and small enough to carry on an airplane to take home with you. And it kept evolving and was like, I don't know, my students always really got into that assignment for some reason. It's like a whole story he tells about it. The thing I said about it on here was, and I agree with this still, is I was like, this book has convinced me that it's impossible to like accidentally do witchcraft and like conjure something from the dead. Because if it was possible, between all the weird shit all these people were doing, and like the weird things outsider artists do, when you've got your tub girls and stuff, you're like, surely if it was possible to like summon a demon, someone would have done it by now, by accident. Next is a 3-volume comic called What's the Furthest Place from Here? And it's basically, it starts out and it kind of reminded me a lot of the movie, not The Outsiders, but the one that's like that, but better, The Warriors. It's kind of like The Warriors. There's these different gangs of young people. There's like a carnival theme gang and there's like a record store theme gang and stuff like that. And they're all young though. And like once they hit a certain age, they have to leave because that something happens. It's kind of mysterious. And the first couple volumes were really good. And then the third volume, it's one of those things where then it explains the entire premise of it. And the explanation, you're just like, I wasn't as into this as the pre-explanation version. Maybe the explanation I made up in my head, which is not concrete in any way, I liked better. Then I read Not Forever, But For Now by Chuck Palahniuk. That was his newest one. Here's what's interesting about this book. Okay. I found this book, reading it, it's a little annoying. And like, there's just weird stuff about it. Now, one problem with it was someone spoiled a significant part of the book for me in their review, in like one line of a review. And Goodreads has a thing that's like, click this to hide spoilers. You know what I mean? And they could have easily done that. And this person was like, I don't care because the book is so bad, I wouldn't recommend anyone read it. And I was like, well, I know you didn't like it, but like, that doesn't mean you should just ruin it for everyone else. You know what I mean? There's been plenty of things I didn't like that other people like, and I don't think that gives me the right to ruin it for someone else. Now, I would say like you have the right to ruin something for someone else if it's a movie that's, let's say, 10 years plus old, right? I don't think you have to like worry about it as much. I mean, if you're on Letterboxd and it's like a mainstream movie, you know what I mean? You don't have to worry about spoiling the ending of Dark Knight Rises, right? Because it's like, it's been out so long, it's in the popular. You don't have to worry about, I think at this point, spoiling the end of like a Star Wars, because like I haven't even seen the last one, but I wouldn't be mad if someone said the ending because I'd be like, at this point, it's on me, right? But when you're talking about a book, such a small audience compared to a movie, and when you're talking about, and it was new at the time, it was brand new. And so spoiling that fucked it up a little for me because I was like, well, if I didn't know what was going on, I'd probably be more interested in you know what I mean? I'd be like, this is really fucked up. And then I'd be like, oh. But here's the other thing. And I'm going to tell you this without spoiling the book because I think it's super significant, but this is a choose your own adventure if you're going to end up reading the book. The deal is I read the whole book and then I just happened to catch there's like a couple pages in the back and it was like an about the author, which is normally where it just like says, Chuck Palahniuk lives in the Pacific Northwest and wrote a book called Fight Club, maybe you heard of one time. But this time, it's a little story that Chuck wrote. And it's talking about how he would meet people on tour a lot and the kinds of things they would tell him. And then he kind of recontextualizes the entire book that you just read. And I was like, at that, like, it worked for me. And normally that kind of thing wouldn't work for me because I'd be like, you put me through like 300 pages of going like, what is he doing? Like, what's happening? And then did that. And I think normally I would sort of be like, well, the juice still wasn't worth, putting my mouth on the nozzle at the Wendy's and pushing the button with my forehead and trying to drink as much as I could before I got thrown out. The squeeze, as they call it. But in this case, it worked for me. I don't think it would work for everyone. And that's not me saying like I'm some kind of super reader or something. That's just me saying, I don't think it would work for everyone for very valid reasons. I don't think every reader is going to react to it that way. But if you're going to read it, make sure to read the author note. That's one thing about it that I found really interesting is like, it's just tucked in there. I just by chance read it because I was finished with the book and I was on break at work and I still had like 10 minutes and I just kind of flipped to the end and then saw it was much longer than normal. And I was like, oh, I wonder what this says. And, it was purely by chance. If it was in an ebook, I definitely wouldn't have read it because fucking Kindle. I hate so much that Kindle will, like, before you're actually at the end of the book, be like, rate this book, you know what I mean? Do all this stuff. And I'm like, fuck off. You know what I mean? Like, let me finish it. And then when I tap to go out of it, when I tap for a menu, then you can bring that up. But before I do that, don't you dare. I've been on this quest online. I've been watching videos and stuff about how to build my own e-reader because I like kind of want to get out of the Kindle trap. But it's complicated. It's hard. And you look at Kindle alternatives and there are many. And I look at like a Books Palma, but they're like $200. You're like, well, that's not great. And no matter what you buy, you are locked into like a software firmware environment. And I don't love that. I don't love the idea of being locked into a thing. So I think that, I don't know, that causes some issues for me. Let's see. What do we have next? Oh, I read The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. However the fuck you say that. The Little Prince. The book inspired by Super Mario Galaxy, I have to assume. This has been on my list for a long time because when I was working with Tom Spanbauer, he recommended me a bunch of books and he mentioned The Little Prince a lot. So I was like, okay, I'm going to read The Little Prince. But, it's like something I never read as a kid or whatever. It's weird. It's super weird. I kind of liked it just because it's so strange, but it's not strange I hate the book The Phantom Toll Booth because that seems to be a book that thinks it's very clever and I don't think it's clever. You know what I mean? But then after I finished it, I was like, there must be a lot going on. You know what I mean? Like, okay. It feels very much like it's metaphorical and all this stuff. And like, yeah, I ran to the internet as soon as I was done to like look up what is The Little Prince about? You know what I mean? What is The Little Prince really about? And it's about a lot. There's a section in the Wikipedia page I'm pulling up here and it's like plot. And it's pretty long. And then like inspirations and all this stuff. The background is like as long as the actual book. It's crazy. And it's kind of sad and you're like, oh, okay. Well, that's unfortunate. I'm not going to tell you all of that because that's, a whole thing. But like the point is, I don't know. I can't decide sometimes if like the existence of the internet is good or bad. And this is one of those where I'm like, it's both. Because it did give me information that helped me understand this children's book that I didn't understand. But also, I don't know that I'm happier for understanding it. I think I'm less happy now that I understand it. So I don't know. It's The Little Prince is a weird book in that it's like it's what I like, which is it's weird, but it's not like I don't know what's happening from moment to moment. You know what I mean? I understand what's going on. I understand what the characters are doing and what they're talking about. It just feels like there's a lot happening beneath the surface that I couldn't crack, really. Um, as opposed to just something where you're like, I don't know, I'm just seeing images and hearing words and they're supposed to mean something to me and they don't. That's the kind of book I do not like. That's the kind of ambiguity doesn't work for me. But anyway, like, so I was able to find out about it, but I was like, oh, this information didn't make me happy. That's for sure. So you're like, I don't know, man. I don't know, man. Is it good? Is it good that we have this internet? I will say these two things. One is that, so supposedly he wrote um, mostly at night. He would start like at 11 at night and, drink a bunch of black coffee and stay up super late and write super, super tired. Not tired. He wasn't actually tired, but he would like write until he just basically collapsed and fell asleep. I do find that interesting. Like, there's something about the process of writing late at night that's different than like getting up in the morning to write or something like that. There's I don't want to say a magic because I hate saying stuff like that. Like writing is magical because I'm like, let's not go crazy. But there's something to it. I gotta say. The other thing is, he's one of these authors who has stories about him, like supposedly, because he flew airplanes in the war and so on, and he supposedly would read while he was flying often, and one time supposedly circled an airport that he was supposed to land at for like an hour because he was trying to finish a book. And you're like, I mean, that's wildly irresponsible, super stupid, but I kind of love it. You know what I mean? Don't you like when there's a story like that? Because you're like, I don't know. It makes me a little sad because I'm like, people used to be so entertained by books that they would like do something like that. You know what I mean? Can you imagine? Can you imagine someone doing that? I could imagine someone being like, well, we had to circle the airport for a little while, but it was fine because I was watching, a movie. I was watching I don't know, the new hit film Weapons in theaters now. Maybe saying that on here will affect some algorithm, but we were watching that on the plane, so it wasn't so bad that we had to spend an extra 45 minutes in the air because I was able to finish it. I cannot imagine someone wanting a flight to take longer to read a book, though. Although that's also informed by how much I hate flying. I'm like, I could read a book in the hotel room or at home, whichever way I'm going. I don't need to finish it on the plane. It's fine. I did read Not Forever, But For Now on a plane, though. And it was good airplane read. All right, everybody. Well, that's a portion of my list for this year, and we'll see you next time for more Pete's Reads of 2025.
Talk about